The content of the Tandem Radio program and website is intended for general information purposes only. It's not designed to provide listeners with specific and personal financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or other advice. The views expressed by show hosts, their guests, and callers are their own and should not be construed in any way as opinions of Tandem Radio or the Bridge FM network.
You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours, says the Lord in Psalm 128:2. Good morning and welcome to Tandem Radio. We're excited to be here as we are every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I like to say that because we're not only on the 6 Bridge FM radio stations that go up and down the East Coast, but we're also heard on the internet at tandemradio.com or on your iPhone or your Droid app, where you can listen to the Bridge FM and hear this show every week, Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're called the Good News on Business. And for those of you who are tuned in for the first time, we have 2 simple goals in our show. Number 1 is to help people who are involved in business or interested in business or maybe a business owner to realize that God wants to be a part of your business, and His Holy Bible is filled with wisdom that can help you every day in your business life. So, what all is fair in love and war is not what Jesus Christ had in mind. He wants to be part of your life 24/7, and that's what our show is all about. So number 1, our first goal is to point you to scripture references that can help you with your business. And our second goal is to bring in unique guests that have some insights, what I call golden nuggets, that they can give us to help us with our business every day. So hopefully Monday morning you'll be able to take some of the notes that you got from this show and use it right in your practical work on a day-to-day basis that can help you succeed and be more profitable in whatever you do. So to that end, we always start off with scriptures. And again, our show is called The Good News on Business, and we often have a subtitle. And today we have a special guest coming in to discuss responsible wealth. And that guest is Frank Congilose, who's the founder of CNA Financial and the Institute of Responsible Wealth. He's an author and a public speaker. And we're going to get to Frank in just a minute. But let's start off with the scriptures for this week. As I often mentioned, God puts these scriptures on my heart, and sometimes they read, and I say, boy, that fits right to the show. And sometimes I read them and I say, God, what are you trying to say here? But by the end of the show, they always tie in together, so it's a lot of fun seeing where He's going to take us today. So here we go, Deuteronomy 8:17-18. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. And Proverbs 14:24, the wealth of the wise is their crown, but the folly of fools yields folly. And Mark 10:21-23, Jesus looked at him and loved him. One thing you lack, He said, go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. At this the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. Jesus looked around and said to His disciples, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. And we're going to get into those scriptures as we move along, but let me introduce you to our guest today, a good friend that I've known for quite a while, and Frank has a couple of books out that are stellar, and he has a third one on the way, which I know we're going to talk about. And it's so good to have Frank on the show. He's got a super busy schedule, always out helping people, and so it was tough to get him in here, but we finally got him in the studio. Again, our guest today is Frank Congilose, who's the founder of CNA Financial and the founder of the Institute of Responsible Wealth. He's also an author, a public speaker, and a lot more. So, Frank, welcome to the show.
Glenn, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and as always, and it's wonderful to see you and Cooper, who's helping the broadcasting of the show. So
Thank
it's
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you. And Frank, why don't you just tell our audience a little about yourself? I know you also have a segment coming on Tandem, which you're going to be partnering with us on, and I'm really excited about that, but we'll talk more about that later in the show, because I know the audience is going to want to hear about that launch, which will be in about a month. But let's start off with telling the audience a little bit about you, Frank. Tell us a little about your background.
Well, just a little background. I'm married to my wife, Diane. We're married 31 years. We have 3 children. My son got married a year ago, and coming up this Sunday. Thank you. Yeah, coming up on Sunday is his anniversary.
Okay.
And a month ago, we married off my daughter, who she just got married off, and I have a youngest daughter who's just finished up her senior year over at TCNJ. So I'm married with 3 children.
Okay.
I live over in Ocean County in Brick Township. I entered into the financial service business back in 1981, and I've been growing an organization there where we have about 40 people that are providing advice and assisting people with finance.
Right.
And that's just giving you a little background on who we are and who I am.
So you've been in the industry quite a while.
Seen quite a bit.
Yeah, seen quite a bit, and I know that's what makes the books such heartfelt books, because as we were talking before, I know sometimes I read a book and I know that author did not go through that and doesn't live what he's telling you to live in the book. Unfortunately, we see that so often. But I know in your books, Frank, and I feel real confidence in your books because I know you actually live out what's in them, and you have 2 out already, right, and a 3rd coming.
Correct. The first one that we put out was, or is, Discovering Responsible Wealth, 15 principles that will change your life. And then the second book, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Responsible Wealth. The 3rd book is coming out, and that'll be geared towards young adults. The book is actually all drafted. It's at edit right now, and I haven't decided exactly what name we want to put on it yet.
Okay.
So that one will be coming out, and we'll be naming that one probably in the next 30 days.
Well, let's talk more about the books in a minute, but let's back up for a second,
Sure.
Frank. Why a career in financial services? What took you in that direction?
What was interesting is that back in 1981, it was an interesting time in the economy. Kind of we were just coming out of a recession back then. And when I came in, started looking for careers, I ended up in the financial service business. It is not what I thought I would be doing. And so it was kind of like, by God's grace, by luck, whatever you want to call it, I ended up in this. And it was interesting. It's a lot of how I developed over the years, even in my faith and everything else that came about through this business.
It's funny you mentioned the 80s, because I remember the 80s as a real thriving time. A lot of things were going on, and it was exciting, a lot of growth. I know I just got out of college, I started my first businesses then, and I kind of, the 90s hit and I lost my sense of humor. It was a tough time in the 90s, but it was a very interesting time. What was going on back then, Frank? Remind some of the people who are listening.
Well, to give you an idea, back in, when I entered into business in 1981, the job market was a little bit tight back then. I had a difficult time in finding something, and then when I entered into the financial business, it was one of the few industries that I found that they were actually hiring at the time. And it was not exactly what I thought I'd be doing, but it was interesting. It is, once I started doing it, it came very naturally to me.
Okay. And it was a big boom at that time, right, the financial industry?
They were the mutual fund industry was starting to turn around, and it was starting to take off. The insurance industry was also getting kind of hot at that point, and then from there, it actually had a great ride for quite a while.
And what did you do specifically? You were doing insurance, you were doing the whole gamut?
I was doing predominantly insurance, and then got into the investment side, providing, then it evolved over years from when you were doing insurance and investments to eventually that became financial planning when you did it on a comprehensive basis.
Now, when did you move into your own business?
I ended up in my own business back in 1983. So I was about 2 years into it before I ended up going out on my own, and that was actually kind of a weird situation. I was working for someone that went out of business on me.
Oh, really?
So I decided, I was like, what, I think I could do this on my own, and then by just kind of grunting it out and learning, that's how it occurred.
And that way you can make sure that would never happen to you again, right?
Well, it's interesting. Even when I write it, I write a lot from the heart and from my own experiences of what I've learned about building a business, growing a business, and even managing finances. And a lot of what I've learned the hard way. So it's easy to share with people.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. When I write my business column, it's always something that has happened to me. It's kind of funny because I get emails and people say, "Well, how did you come up with that concept?" And I'm like, "I lived it."
Exactly.
And it's amazing, Frank. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. And it's kind of strange that people don't realize that a lot of times, especially I read books, it's the same experiences over and over again. People come into the same pitfalls and they fall and they got to get back up again, and it's kind of crazy how we all have to kind of live through it to be able to help other people to share it with.
Well, it becomes part of your testimonial. It's who you are, and so when you live it, you can expand to others. You can help others and help them through whatever they're going through, and you can provide those insights.
Right.
And sometimes when you provide those insights, but it's through maybe a different perspective, that's how people learn. It's how hopefully you can impact their life.
Well, they say the man with the experience will usually win the argument, right?
There you go.
So now you built CNA Financial, right?
Correct.
And you're up to 40 people today. I know you got a beautiful office. You built a beautiful building from ground up, right? You did that. And but you've gotten into a lot more. I know in your bio it mentioned there the GAMA Foundation and a Leadership Hero Award. What's that about? Just tell me.
Well, GAMA is called the General Agents and Managers Association. It's a global organization with regard to people who manage other people in the financial service industry. And some time back, we had one of our associates and a friend in the business who I had extended a lot of extra help to. And he wrote in about what I had done for him, how it impacted his life.
Oh.
And Gamma recognizes what are referred to as leadership heroes, which are people that have made a difference in other people's lives. And that year there were two of them. There was myself and another individual. So it was a great honor. It's a nice honor when you get it from someone who appreciates what you do and when you impact their life. So it was wonderful.
You know, I know we touched on CNA Financial. I think people have kind of a concept of what's there. Certainly there'll be a link to that on our tandemradio.com site, and people can contact you there. Tell us just real quick, because we're coming up on a break, Institute of Responsible Wealth, where did that come from?
Where that came from is that I was trying to identify how I can provide resources to people, because what would typically happen in their life is that you'd kind of envision life that it would be, you'd hope that you'd start out in a career, you'd do well financially, perhaps you get married, you'd have children, you'd do all those different things, and that life would hopefully just come together perfectly and you'd leave this legacy.
Right.
Unfortunately, life happens, and
right.
when life happens, people get diffused, and when I say diffuses, it's like, whether it's a child with a learning disability or you're dealing with aging parents or whatever the case might be, and people look for resources as to where can I get help, or what I'm living through right now, where can I get some assistance. So I set up the Institute of Responsible Wealth as a resource center to provide those insights, where we shoot interviews with people, and also as an educational platform where we can educate people on making better financial decisions, better life decisions, and so forth. And one of the things we'll bring up maybe a little bit later in the interview is the wealth building blocks, which is where it really comes together out of part of what I write about.
Right. Well, there's so much to develop there, and in the next segment we'll focus on the Institute, because I know that you have a lot to offer people. And if you're listening and you're not driving, this is the time to take notes. So get your pen and pad out, because Frank's got some powerful information here. And of course, you can reach Frank through the tandemradio.com website. Don't forget, tandemradio.com. We'd love to hear from you. info@tandemradio.com. That's info@tandemradio.com is our email address. If you drop us a line with your business questions, we'll either answer your question or direct you to someone who can answer your question, but we'll certainly pray about your business for you and do our best to help you out with there. You can also reach us at Tandem Radio on Facebook. You want to just type in Tandem Radio on Facebook and like us and say a quick hello. We'd love to hear from you, and wherever you are. We get excited about people, whether they're in our backyard, or sometimes we hear from people internationally, and it's always neat to see and hear those requests. So you're listening to Tandem Radio. We're here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The good news on business is what we're all about. So for more good news, stay tuned. We'll be back right after these words.
2, 1, cut. Hi, my name is Cooper Ford from Tandem Radio, the good news on business. I want to thank you for joining us for this episode. Hopefully you've been getting some fantastic insights from Glenn and our featured guest. While we're taking this break, I want to introduce you to our website at tandemradio.com, where there's a wealth of information focusing on bringing Christian principles into the business world. First of all, we have some of our other archive shows that are on there, where you can see some of our past guests and listen to their shows. Second, we also have Ask Tandem, which is our shorter video segments focusing on specific questions related to faith and the workplace. And finally, we have our sponsors, like-minded businesses and professionals who not only share our mission, but also who want to serve you. So check it all out at tandemradio.com. If you want to get in touch with us, you can also email us at info@tandemradio.com. That's info@tandemradio.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks again for joining us, and let's get back to Glenn and the show. God bless.
Well, welcome back to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn Delakian, and I'm excited to be in the studio today with Frank Congilose, who is the founder of CNA Financial and the Institute of Responsible Wealth. He's also an author, wrote 2 books and has a 3rd on the way, and a accomplished public speaker. I've actually been out speaking with Frank on occasion at a couple of seminars, and always great to hear what he has to say. And he has a wealth of knowledge. The topic for today is responsible wealth, and that's what Frank's all about, helping people to manage their finances properly and help them realize the impact on their overall life in that respect. And it's so important to realize Christ talked about finances so much in his ministry. I think we miss that and don't realize that he was trying to make a point that our finances can really bend us in so many different ways and take us off track. And that's what the world is set up to do. I mean, the world literally pulls us away from the things that are really important in our lives, and we need to get back on track. And that's where things like the Institute of Responsible Wealth and some of the books that Frank wrote can make such a difference. Frank, I know we were talking about the Institute, but let's back up for a second and talk about the books real quick. 2 books are out, right?
Correct.
Give us the titles again.
We have Discovering Responsible Wealth, 15 Principles That Can Change Your Life, and then we have An Entrepreneur's Guide to Responsible Wealth.
Right, and I thought that was neat. Do you see a big difference between the general public and the people you wrote the first book for and the entrepreneur, which obviously the second book was focused on?
Really 2 different messages. The first message really was designed to help people to get their life kind of in balance and what I refer to as alignment, and to give them some guidance on how to determine what I refer to as everything in life is an asset or a liability. So even, whether it be relationships, health, how you treat your faith, when you're doing the right things, you're building assets. When you're doing things that are not in alignment, you're building liabilities. And if you end up with more liabilities, you end up that your life's out of whack and you're not going to be very happy. So the first book is really geared towards helping you to do that, and helping you do some planning, and to really set some goals for yourself, and then to come out with a process to get what you want. The second book is geared towards that entrepreneur, and it's really designed to teach people and to help them to focus really on, number one is you're your best asset.
Right.
Okay, so you're going to, if you're an entrepreneur, your business is the best place for you to be placing your money, not somebody else's business.
That's right.
And then how do you build a successful business? And then from how do you build it to how do you leave a legacy in there to do the right things? And then I address also the idea of stewardship, which is everything you do, how you are, how you act, and who you are to people is all your form of stewardship right through your business, and it comes through in who you are.
And I think that's such an important point, the stewardship aspect, because we do have this blessing, especially business owners, we have this blessing of this gift to be an entrepreneur, because I think that's a very unique, it's kind of, I say it's in the DNA, but we'll talk about that another time. But we have this blessing. What do we do with it? I know a lot of people squander it. I know I did in my early years. I opened and closed a lot of businesses, opened, sold, whatever. But you learn that these are gifts that God gave you, and that you do have to be a good steward over them. And I think a lot of people miss that point.
It's 100%, and it's it's that gift, and it's gets right into how you treat people, how you're fair, what people see. Are you stand up in what you do? Is what you say consistent with what you do?
Right, right.
And that really sends out a message, and that's how either you're going to build a successful business or you're not, and it kind of tells you who you are. And it's when I say who you are, it's not saying that you're bad. It's really saying is if you're not in alignment, what can we do to help you get in alignment?
Right, exactly. And I love it. That's why I really enjoy your books, and I think you've done a great job with both of them so far, and I look forward to seeing the third one. So let's talk more about the Institute. So now you have these books. Obviously, people can pick them up and read them, but people need more than that, right? So you started the Institute. So tell us a little bit more about. You talked about building blocks before. What is the Institute doing on a day-to-day basis?
What the Institute of Responsible Wealth core purpose is really to be a resource center for people. I really believe that what happens with people in life is that we're all well-intentioned, but then life hits us.
Right.
And when I say life hits us, it could be that you lose a job or you have something else that's coming up. And those are usually what I call the 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning wake-up calls, where you're sitting there at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning thinking about something that's bothering you.
Right.
And if you don't get resolution on whatever it is that's bothering you or what you have on your mind, that can go on for a long time, and it weighs, and it kind of eats into you having a productive, happy, fulfilling life. So what I try to identify which is in the wealth building blocks, which is, I'll just mention what they are, which is your faith, your family, your health, career, and then your finances. Out of those 5 wealth building blocks, what is it that may be impacting you? And then what I've done and what we've been putting in place is I interview people from different professions that are experts in different fields that provide like a 15-minute message on what to deal with or how to deal with a situation. So if it was on aging parents, I'll do an interview with an elder care attorney on, elder care.
Right.
Or if it's something on a child with a disability or a learning disability, we'll shoot an interview on that. And the whole idea is to build out content to help people, and then to also take that out, get that out so that people can get the help that they want so they can get back to having a productive life. And then the second side of that is really to have an educational platform whereby we can educate people on how to make better decisions and kind of help and coach them through life to help them to get the life that they want.
Give us again, just to back up, give us the 5 building blocks again, because I know people are listening, maybe they missed them.
It's your faith, your family, your health, purpose, and which is career, okay, and then it comes down to finances. And one of the things that I'll do a lot of times is when I'm speaking publicly, I'll lay those out and I'll say, so I purposely put finance last because I'm a financially oriented person. It's what I do for, my profession. And I'll say, so which of the top four would you give up for the money?
Right.
And it's interesting, everybody ever says none of them.
Right.
But it's interesting that so much of what occurs in money controls what we do in the other four aspects of our life. And so what I try to do is talk to people about how do you get that balance back, and that it's not all about money, although money is important and it impacts every part of your life, but how do you bring it all together? And that's a lot of what I teach, and it's a lot of my message.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny because I was going to bring that up because that's the first time I ever heard that was in one of your seminars, and it made me really think, which one of these things would you give up? And it's like, I don't know, but unfortunately, even inadvertently, people give up a lot of those other things, right, because of the money issue.
And it's interesting is you're 100%, which is there's a lot of people that money means everything. And typically what we find out is that their life ends up pretty much out of balance, and it's one of those of, they end up typically losing their family. They've oftentimes have not had any faith, and then what happens is either they never come around, or it's at some point, God willing, they get broken.
Right.
And then they turn their life around, and then they start getting things back in order, and they realize that their faith was important to them, and that God is the one that's going to get them back on track. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh boy, family is what really also mattered in my life, and boy, I need to take care of my health. And all of a sudden it starts lining back up to those 5 wealth building blocks again, and so that we're back on track.
Yeah, my wife and I used to teach a course, and it was break down before breakthrough. So true, unfortunately, as human beings, I know I've been there, we have to, God sometimes has to take us to the lowest place to realize that, we need to change some things in our life, So I'm glad to hear that. And the other thing I know, I mentioned this before real quick, you can change anytime, right, Frank? I mean, no matter where you are. I mean, even if somebody's listening right now and they're at the depths of where they think they're the worst place they've ever been financially in their life, you can still make something happen, right?
I got news for you. It's how it all starts, and it's one of those of some people wake up while things are great, and unfortunately for some of us, I was one of those where it's like I was struggling when it hit me, and so it's like everybody's a little bit different. So, but anytime.
I sometimes just from a faith perspective, sometimes God lets everything go away from us to realize that He's always going to be there. That even in the bottom of the pit, He's still going to be there for us, and it's amazing how He picks us up, dust us off, and let us get back on track again. And hopefully some people will hear that right now and reach out to you or the Institute, and certainly your books, and get that help that they need. So the third book, real quick, let's just talk a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about where that's going.
The third book is really geared towards that 18, 19-year-old to 25, 26-year-old crowd. It's really kind of became my sweet spot a little bit when I was watching and observing my children,
right.
Which is I'd be at different functions, and my one daughter's an English teacher, and she'd say something about finance. I said, "Babe, that's not how that works." And she goes, "I go, well, that's what I got you for." He said, "Well, that's what if I wasn't here?" And
right.
So my thing is to really give some perspectives on helping the younger generation make better decisions financially, and also my observation in coaching them and hiring them over the years, because I've hired a lot of people right out of college, and we've developed them, of what I've observed in order to help young people to build successful and fulfilling lives and careers. So I share that, and it's one of those of the better the decisions that you make in all the aspects of your life, the more likely you are to get the life that you hope and you wish for.
Right.
And I spend time just talking about that.
And that's so important, especially today, because I think they say statistically 50% of college grads are unemployed right now. I think there's so much career movement. People are getting out with certain degrees and doing something totally different. Good and bad sometimes, for that matter. And I think kids, students, young adults are searching, because there's a big gap out there. They step out of college and they don't want to flip burgers. They want to go out and do something that's more fulfilling for their life. And this book speaks to that.
It speaks to that. Part of what I try to share is there's a lack of leadership. Who we see as ideals right now are not necessarily 100% true.
I hear you.
And so what I try to share with them is that life can be bigger than what you think. Okay, I try to get them to think bigger than what they may have thought prior, and then to help them to really start planning for their life and how to become an asset and not a liability, even to somebody else. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, Frank. When we come out of the break, I want to talk about identifying role models, because I don't think there's enough good ones out there for sure. But there is a way to find some, right?
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about that right after the break. You're listening to Tandem Radio. There's your host, Glenn DeLake, and again, here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to reach out to us at info@tandemradio.com. That's info@tandemradio.com. Or on Facebook, Tandem Radio. Just type in Tandem Radio. You'll come right to our Facebook. By the way, for those of you who are in that college age group, there's Ask Tandem, a great video segment that Cooper Ford does here. It's posted every week on YouTube, and you can check it out. You may want to watch it once or twice or 3 times even, but you'll find valuable information from our guests that are right here on the show, getting more details specific to that age group of those who have just graduated college or stepping into the business world. We'll be right back after these words. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLake, and here with our guest, Frank Congilose, who's a founder of CNA Financial and the Institute of Responsible Wealth. He's also an author, got 2 books out and 1 on the way, and a public speaker, an accomplished public speaker. He does a great job out there helping people and guiding people with responsible wealth, which is the theme of the show today. I just want to hit on our scriptures again, because they're just so important, and I think we'll talk about each one as we go along. But Deuteronomy 8:17-18. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. That is so important to keep yourself in check. Proverbs 14:24, the wealth of the wise is their crown, but the folly of fools yields folly. And lastly, Mark 10:21. And I point out this scripture because I think people take scripture and sometimes misinterpret it, and I think it's so important for us to realize what this is saying. This is not by any means a condemnation to rich people or to wealth by any stretch of imagination, but Jesus makes a powerful point here, and I think Frank even touched on it in the last segment about how people focus, and if they're focused on their wealth, that's where this young ruler was focused on as well, and Jesus knew it. Jesus looked at him and loved him. One thing you lack, he said, go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. At this, the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, how hard is it for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven? And again, I like to give that scripture perspective because people often misinterpret that, because he went on in the scripture to say, and all things are possible with God. So I think a lot of people took that and said, wealthy people will never get into heaven. That's not what it's saying by any stretch of imagination, and I'm glad we could just put that out there and talk about that in the show today. So we're touching on a lot of things today, and one of the things I want to talk about is actually CNA Financial itself. I know we talked about the institute that you've developed and continue to develop, Institute for Responsible Wealth, Frank. But CNA is unique in itself, and I think that's why I deal with you guys. I happen to be a client of CNA, so I'm honored to have them here, and I'm speaking from firsthand experience. So Frank, why don't you tell our folks how and why CNA is a little bit different in itself? Because I think that speaks for you, that you can take something that people would kind of take for granted, oh, it's a financial institution or a financial group, and make assumptions, right? But I think you've turned into something very unique.
Absolutely. It's interesting is, when I started in the financial service industry years ago, it was, I'll give my golf club example, which is, everyone would want you to believe that, hey, if you were a golfer, if you went out and you got a different set of clubs by a different company or used different golf balls, it would improve your game.
Right.
And the financial service field does basically the same thing, which is, my mutual fund's better than yours, my 529 plan's better than yours, or this insurance is better than that. And what happens is that most of what occurs out there is really a lot of product peddling. And when I say product peddling, it's not mocking people and so forth, but the reality is that the belief is that your success will come through the success of a product, and that's not true. And what we had identified over the years is that products, some of them fail, some of them succeed. The products are not necessarily the key to someone's financial success. It's really the process in which is utilized. So we went years ago and we got away from doing what I refer to as needs-based planning, which is like also headache and aspirin planning, which is I convince you have a headache in order to sell you another product. to really doing what I refer to as more process-based planning, which is really trying to help people to be a little bit more efficient and to focus on strategies. So if I said to you today, Len, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a great set of golf clubs, or would you rather have a great golf swing?
Right.
You'd get a lot more mileage out of the golf swing. So our whole focus is really on the process of what occurs, identifying where people lose money, showing them how to recapture that money, and then how to be more efficient with what you're doing. And when the focus is on that, it really becomes more client-centered, less product-centered. And so we're focusing on the client, and we're not really out there trying to push product and representing just a financial institution trying to hit their bottom line. So that's really the difference.
And in itself, that's very unique in your industry.
It's totally opposite of everybody else. If you really think in terms of what's common out there, what you'll hear are terms like mutual funds, ETFs, 529, 401k, you hear all that, and that's all common.
Right.
And the reality is if I were to say, okay, well, the wealthy people in our country, do you think that they made their money doing those things or doing other things?
Right.
And the reality is that the wealth in our country, it's a 90-10 rule. 90% of the wealth in the country is controlled by 10% of the population. That's not how they became wealthy. They became wealthy being educated and understanding the process on how money is utilized. They understand also the aspect that they're their best asset, not some mutual fund in something or something else. And then, because this is Tandem Radio, is your best opportunities are oftentimes your own business. Your stock may be better off than the stock someone's trying to sell you. So we actually talk about that, and we support that belief system, and we show people how to build a financial profile and program and process around that.
Well, that's one of the reasons I can freely recommend you guys and enjoy doing so, because I know people aren't getting sold, they're getting helped, they're getting guided, directed, and I think that makes such a difference, and your staff emulates that, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So CNA Financial and the Institute, two things you built and have been successful with. Let's talk more about, you mentioned before role models, and I always talk about mentors on the show, and I think that's so important. Where are people getting their role models from today that you see?
I think that they spend a lot of time watching television, unfortunately, and they're thinking that reality TV is real life, and that's just not real. So I think that when you're out and you're talking to people, and I just find this is we ask where do they spend their time, and they're spending their time if they're watching TV or they're doing that as compared to doing things in order to get them the life that they want.
Right.
So it's one of those of if you said, okay, well, you want to physically get in great shape, and I say, okay, well, physically you want to get in great shape, and I said, well, how much exercise did you do? And you said, well, I didn't do anything. I said, well, what did you do last night? You said, well, I watched TV for 2 hours.
Right.
So that's why I say, those types of role models, that what you see on TV oftentimes is really not real, but yet it kind of puts in your head what you start to envision is what might be real. And so it's hard to see that where if you just get out there and you're dealing with real people, and you see how they live, you see what they do, and you're around good people, you can start to emulate what you're seeing there.
I don't know what it is or why, but I don't know if it's fear, but I think people a lot of times don't seek out role models. They don't look for someone that can help them. And I want to clarify to the audience too, and tell me if you agree with me, Frank, but I think a lot of times the people who are most successful are often the ones who are most willing to help you. And if you reach out to those people, you see someone who is successful in a certain arena and you want to be successful in that area, if you would take the time to ask, in a professional fashion obviously, but if you would take the time to ask and be sincere in it, you'll get the response that you're looking for. Would you find that to be true?
I agree. People that are real, and I always say real is that they live what they say. It's one of those that they're consistent in that. Will generally share with you what they're doing. They'll share with you what they've been through, their experiences. And I always say is the easy road is not often the right road.
Right.
And most people, though, we're looking for a quick fix, and the quick fix doesn't come. So it's one of those of when you say, what, we'll find good role models, look at people that are living the type of life that you'd like to emulate, and find out how they did it. And what you also find out is what you see them living today wasn't how they got there. And when I say that is it was a lot more difficult, and they built their way up to this. So they didn't end up there immediately.
Right.
And a lot of times we look and go, oh, I can't be there tomorrow. And I say, no, but it doesn't work that way.
Right.
And success is in the journey, as they say,
right.
not necessarily thinking that it's the destination. So when you're doing that and you're you're growing and you're succeeding, you're accomplishing things, it builds your confidence and it builds who you are. And that's really, when you think in terms of role models, those are the type of people you want to follow and that you want to learn from.
And that's such a good point, Frank, because so many people assume that success is overnight for people, right? They look at them and go, man, well, he's an overnight success. How many times do you hear that, right?
That's not what, and for most of them it wasn't that at all. They missed the fact that that business owner works 77 hours a week or 80 hours a week or 7 days a week to get all of a sudden an infrastructure or whatever that gave them maybe a better quality of life later on.
Right, exactly.
So it doesn't happen overnight, but yet we're in what I call sometimes the now generation, which is I want to do it now.
Yeah.
And it just takes time, and when you're doing it the right way, you're growing, you're achieving, and it's building who you are as a character, and you're learning, and that's also where you get an opportunity to share with others so that the next generation can do the same thing.
Right. It's so important. We try to encourage people on the show. First, get on your knees, find out what God's guidance is, then find yourself a mentor or a role model that you can come alongside and ask for some help. Even if it's sporadic help, it's better to have somebody you can go to once in a while. But it's a two-way street. You got to want it really bad. I don't know about you, Frank, but I often get people come to me and say, "Hey, I want to start. I've always wanted to own my own business. I want to start a business, and I know you're in business, blah 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 blah." And I'll say something simple to them like, "All right, well, drop me an email with your thoughts on your business, or do you have a business plan?" No, okay, drop me an email that says and you never get that second contact. It's amazing how many people want, but they don't make the next step.
Well, there's a wonderful book out by a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek. The book is called Start With Why. And it's interesting because most people will talk about what they want to do and how they want to do it, but they don't have the why. And so the reality is that when you have a big enough why, which is where I get into purpose and so forth, that'll really tell you where you're heading if you're going down the right direction. And then starting with why and purpose, then you can fill out after that what you want to do and how you're going to do it. And a lot of times most people, when they're starting out in life, they're telling you what they want to do, how they want to do it, but they don't have any purpose for that.
Right. So it's the why is more important than the how, when, where, what. Right?
Purpose is everything.
Purpose is everything. Thank you, Frank. We got so much more to cover, and I can't believe we're already through 3 segments already, but we'll get you back here one day. And I know you got your own show coming up on Tandem very soon, going to be launched in about a month, and there are going to be some pretty sharp segments that you'll hear more about in the days ahead. So stay tuned for Tandem. We're just a resource for you for business in general. And again, you can find us at tandemradio.com. That's tandemradio.com. Or on Facebook. Just go to Facebook, type in Tandem Radio, and you'll see all the fun posts that Cooper puts on there, and some videos, and our guests, and all types of information. But again, if you're listening and business is something you're interested in, you need to reach out and make it happen. It's not going to just come to you. You got to go out there and make a difference. So we'll be right back after these words with a lot more from Frank Congilose. Well, welcome back to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn Delakian, here today speaking about responsible wealth with someone who's an expert in that area with a lot of experience, not only written 2 books, but a 3rd one on the way, Frank Congilose, who's founder of CNA Financial and the Institute of Responsible Wealth. He's an author, as I mentioned, and also an accomplished public speaker that just goes out and helps people in so many different ways. And if you need financial help, Frank's definitely a guy you want to talk to, and you can reach him through our website at tandemradio.com. There'll be a link there for you, and you can connect with the Institute of Responsible Wealth as well as CNA Financial and find out about his books and so forth. And Frank, on that note, so I don't forget, I know you have a new show coming up that is going to be here on Tandem with us. I think you're going to be on, I think right after us or right before us. I think you're going to be on right before us. But anyway, the point is that you're going to be doing these 15-minute segments. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you got planned for that?
Well, the program will be Discovering Responsible Wealth, and really what we're going to try to do in each program is a couple of things. One is we're going to try to keep you up to date on what's going on in the financial world. Second thing is how to make better financial decisions. Where does finance play in your overall life and so forth. And then on the business side, we'll also be giving business owners some perspectives on building the business. How do you build the top line, the bottom line? How do you create value? And then even we'll get into some business succession planning, because for every business owner at some point, that stock that you spent a lifetime building, if it's got no value at the end, it was all for nothing.
That's right.
And then really, how does stewardship and everything else also play a role into everything that you do, and how does finance, business, and everything else, how does it all come together? Because it's one aspect of your life. It is not your entire life. And so that message will always come through in everything that we're talking about. And our guests also will be coming in who'll be experts in different fields of finance and so forth, just to share our people on how to get some different perspectives and some education.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, like you mentioned, the building blocks. I just take that analogy because I think sometimes people think there's a quick fix for your finances, you know, that, oh, Frank, you tell me this one sentence and it's going to change everything. It's really a building block situation. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's why your show, the segments, are so important, because people will be able to listen each week, take advice from each week, and then build on that and continue to grow on it. Right?
Absolutely. And it'll be, you know, and I'm one of those where I give examples of everything just to keep things very simple. And yet, even though they're simple examples, they have a lot of depth to them when you start to understand what's behind it and how things work. And we're going to really disclose for people, how does the financial world really work, and then how do you get out of life what you want to get out of life financially, and how do you make better decisions. And
what I like about the examples you give, Frank, I know they're always real life examples, so they come from your own practical experience with what you've seen others do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's so important. I mean, if we're, I've always learned that there's two ways to learn, the hard way and the easy way, right? The hard way is doing it yourself, the easy way is gleaning from somebody else's experience. And the Bible speaks about that so often, learning from other people's experience. And it's so critical for us to realize that the Scripture, for example, has many of those experiences in it. So in that realm, Frank, what have you found as far as the Bible? Do you feel that that's a place where people can get wealth management advice?
I think that I don't think you can get your wealth management advice there, but I think it gives you the perspectives on where money sits in your life, where it should be in your life. And then the other side of that is it gives you some common practice, which regard to understanding that lending money, and things of that nature, not guaranteeing other people's notes, and doing things that are logical and make sense, but yet on the emotional side, we do the opposite. It's no different, when they talk about, becoming a guarantor for somebody else, and all of a sudden it's like you have your brother-in-law who's opening up a business. He knows nothing about it, but it sounded like a good idea, and you're signing the note, only to find out that he didn't pay the note. You're on the hook for the note and everything else. And legitimately, scripturally, it's all in there.
Right, exactly.
Because there's a lot of examples like that when you look at that, it's all throughout.
I think, like you said, the number one thing about Scripture is it puts money in the perspective it needs to be in, and finances. But it speaks to stewardship, and I always find that people are amazed when they find these nuggets in the Bible and say, wait, that applies to my business, or wait, that applies to my finances, and it's crazy.
It's every aspect, and it's interesting because even when we talk about stewardship and so forth, people think, oh, here they go, talking about money and giving, and stewardship, though, is more of who you're being as well. So it's like if you're cheating your customers out there, if you're a business owner, you're just not being a good steward there either. And it's in every aspect of your life. So,
no, absolutely, and I appreciate that. Why should business owners seek your advice, Frank? Let's be just frank with them, no pun intended. But why would they seek out Frank Congilose for business advice?
Because as a financial advisor, most people in the financial service industry will talk about, here's an investment for you, here's insurance for you, and things of that nature. And we're not saying that those aren't good, they're needed, they're important, and so forth.
Right.
But my first question for someone is going to be is your best way to return your own business? Are you better off, instead of taking money from your business and giving it to me so I can go out and invest it elsewhere, would you be better off putting that back in your business, and where would be opportunities in your business that perhaps you might get a better return on that? And most people in the financial service business wouldn't come out and tell you that, and the reason being is because they don't sell that.
Right.
So if I am going to tell you to do that, all of a sudden that might cost me a sale. All of a sudden I'm no longer objective in what I'm telling you, and our whole thing is really to be objective and to tell them the truth, which is what is it they should be doing, where should they be going with their money, and how to make a better decision.
And not to get off track here, and we're trying to give nuggets out there, right?
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
It's radio, but let's talk about government for a second. Obviously, there's a big election coming up, a lot of things. I'm not going to go to where, who, why.
Yep.
But let's talk about, does the government really have an impact on how we make our business decisions every day? Or should it?
Well, the government has an impact on everything that happens in the financial world, and although we're talking nuggets and so forth, you couldn't run a business where you spend more than you earn. And yet is
unless you're in government.
and you have the ability to print money.
Right.
So that being the case, that leads to a whole host of issues. And so if your belief system is that, well, the way that we're going to be able to fix that is to raise taxes for a business owner and an entrepreneur, that's a challenge, because money that you could be putting back into your business all of a sudden is going to be going to taxes, so it'll stifle growth.
Right.
But on the other side of that, there's a lot of people that have needs and so forth that, if they cut programs, so there's a balancing act that goes on, and what happens, unfortunately, through government is that it impedes a lot of times how you're going to grow your business, and the other side of that is that you become more and more of a target as time goes on if you're building a successful business.
So does it taint your advice, or I shouldn't say taint, but does it adjust your advice or guide your advice depending on who's in office?
Absolutely. Well, who's in office, not so much. It's interesting, I always say is, most people are kind of like middle of the road. They're not far left, they're not far right, because they never get elected,
right.
If you really thought about it. So most of them, the people that get in office are somewhat moderates. But what really occurs over a period of time is that you have to understand is that, most people that get elected are telling people what they like to hear in order to get elected, otherwise people wouldn't vote for them.
Right.
So that being the case, as a business owner, even as an individual, you need to manage your finances in such a way that you don't put all of your money or a lot of your money in situations where it could be subject to a lot of what I call government control, whereby you may pay more taxes later, you may be more subject to any type of confiscation or whatever. That comes in all different forms, whether it be a tax to whatever the case might be.
Well, Frank, and again, not to jump around, but I think the point was made that it's so important, when, depending on what the government says or does, to know someone who's in a position who is aware of that when they're giving financial advice. So when they come to you, obviously they know that you're putting that into the equation.
Well, yeah. I mean, we live in what I refer to as a macro, world, which is when you're making financial decisions, you don't make them in a vacuum where to say, but I got a tax deduction today, or it was a good rate of return today, and say, yeah, but you're going to get killed in taxes tomorrow. You really have to have that macro perspective where you look at everything in order to best evaluate what's best for people.
And I think that's powerful advice. Frank, I know you're a man of faith. Real quick, how's your faith really impacted what you're doing on a daily basis? It's how I start my day. I mean, when I say it's how I start my day, I mean, my thing is our belief system is there's no right way to do the wrong thing. And how do we serve the people that we come in contact with every day? I mean, and it really comes down to truth, which is when I'm visiting with you, and I don't care if you're one of my staff members, you're my friend, or whatever the case might be, it all starts with truth. Can I help you? Can I not help you? What you're asking of me, is it something I can do and I can live with? And so it really comes down to your core values, which is if you're always seeking to do the right thing, you'll make better decisions and so forth. You might not always give people the answer that they want to hear, but at least if you're giving them the truth, you can always live with that, and you're doing the right thing. And there's a powerful statement for you. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. I love it. Frank, thanks for coming in.
Glenn, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure being with you today.
Same here, and we're looking forward to your show launching. We'll be having more detail on that on this show in the days ahead, and everybody will be ready for that exciting launch, so I'm really fired up about that.
Thank you.
Frank Congilose, who's the founder and owner of CNA Financial and the Institute of Responsible Wealth, and he's also an author. 2 great books out, a third one coming. You want to make sure that you get a handle on that. And also public speaking. Frank does a lot of public. Real quick, Frank, what's one of your favorite topics to talk about?
One of my favorite subjects really talking about how people life, which is, how do you get the life that you want, or the things that you're doing in alignment with the outcome that you're seeking. So that's really the goal.
There you go. Alignment in your life. Go to tandemradio.com. Find the resources there. Connect with Frank. Find out how to get alignment in your life. I love that. God, thank you for the scriptures today. The powerful word of the Lord always has such an impact. If you let it, if you allow it in your life, and if you seek God's will in all that you do, especially your business, I think you'll be much, much more successful for it. And you'll find the peace and the joy of things that are most happy for you, and that'll mean something in your life long term. Isn't that what it's all about? You're listening to Tandem Radio. We're here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'd love to hear from you. So Facebook, Tandem Radio. Like us there, Tandem Radio on Facebook, or send us a message there. And don't forget, Ask Tandem. It's out on YouTube. You want to check out Cooper Ford. He has some great interviews there, and he always has something new for us there. So if you're college age or someone who just got into the workforce, Ask Tandem is a great place to be focused. We got so much more coming up in the weeks ahead, and new segments coming out, and you'll have all that information in the days ahead. So stay tuned right here to tandemradio.com. Tandem Radio, who's here every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be blessed. And remember, God wants you to be successful, and He'll do everything He can if you'll do everything you can to seek His face. God bless you and have a great weekend.